Okay.
Okay, we are live coast to coast, border to border on iHeartRadio today. Also, the Odyssey app, and we have the fantastic Frank Vernuccio with us. Dan Perkins is also with us. IQL Rizzoli will be on his way. And we have got a lot to cover here with Vernuccio. So, Frank, you seem to have you've got a lot of sources. My God, you've been doing this since as a good friend of mine used to say, since God was a baby. You you have been making all this work. What are some of the different things that are going on that we need to be discussing? Let's start there, Vernuccio.
Well, first, let me dispel the rumor that I covered in person the Washington inauguration. I did not do that.
You were having a beer at the tavern.
Well, the two key stories, I think, obviously, are Charlie Kirk. And I think also we have to take a look at the Russian drones going into Poland, Romania, and apparently Lithuania as well. Those are the two key stories. And we can't forget also the Tommy Robinson demonstrations in the UK, which are significant unto themselves. First, in terms of Charlie Kirk, one of the myths that's been propagating itself among the airways, particularly among leftist outlets, is that violence is an equivalent problem both on the left and on the right, that it's somehow both sides are equally guilty. That is clear and utter nonsense. There is no conservative or Republican version of Antifa. There is no conservative or Republican version of Black Lives Matter. There is no call for assassination of liberal or Democrat figures. The equivalence argument that's been making the rounds is sheer nonsense. We should reject it out of hand. I'd like to see the evidence that they claim make this an equivalent problem. The left will point to one day or isolated incidents of January 6th or something like that. But one Antifa summer, one Black Lives summer, and certainly an assassination of a Charlie Kirk. Even individually, they put to the lie any collection of any offenses that they allege the right may have committed over the years. This is a problem strictly on the left, completely on the left. Left-wing leaders refuse to denounce it, and that is a real crisis. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, I tend to agree with you. I looked at this situation and I keep listening to this. I can't believe, Frank, the vitriol that's coming out of some people who have been given a platform on the internet to spew their awful state. I saw one this afternoon that almost made me want to vomit, and it was this considerably oversized black woman who about every third word was a serious expletive, and was talking about why Charlie needed to be killed. And it's all over. There were stories running around. I don't know whether you heard them, Frank. They were rumors yesterday that came out early in the morning that Donald Trump had Charlie killed. It's just amazing. And then
I can believe Netanyahu and Israel, but not Trump. But just jump in there, Dan.
Okay, thank you. So we've got this hatred that is so prevalent on the Democratic Party, that I was going to ask you about this, Frank, anyway, but I've come to a revolution or insight or epiphany or whatever you want to call it. It seems to me that the left has incredibly terrible timing. If you look at the stories, Frank, that we've been talking about on and on and on, Trump's on the 80% side or 90% side, and the Democrats are on the 5 to 15% side. The reality is that Donald Trump is dictating the agenda. he's going after Memphis and his next shot, but at the same time, he's criticizing the mayor of Chicago, setting up the next opportunity for him to go after people. And so I think that their timing is off. They're out of touch with the American people. I think the guy from Dowd who was within moments after Charlie was shot and killed, he was complaining and not wishing any ill will, but was in fact wishing ill will to everybody because he deserved to be shot. You know, the left, as you so accurately pointed out, the left is operating from a catch-up position. They have no unifying leader who's helping them put together a message. We had Kamala yesterday or over the weekend saying that finally agreed that Biden shouldn't have run. Buttigieg said on Saturday, you may have heard this, Frank, that Biden shouldn't have run in 2020. He was not there. So they are in a terrible, terrible, and deservedly so slump because they can't seem to get anything right.
And it dovetails into another issue, which is why is the left so prone to violence? And the reason is that when you can't win an argument peaceably, you turn to violence. Look, let's look at all the left's positions, the grand total of their positions. Socialism has been an utter failure for 120 years. Whether we're talking about communist socialism or national socialism, it's been an utter failure. So when you can't win an argument saying that our economic ideas are good, you use violence to silence all of your critics. Look at their crime ideas. Cashless bail has been an absolute disaster. Turn them loose. DAs have been an absolute disaster. So what do you do when you can't win an argument with words? You win it with violence. And I think that's been the underpinning of the left's position on all of these 90-10 issues. If you disagree with them, you're a Nazi, you're a fascist, you're whatever. And if you try to use your words to counter them, well, then we'll just shoot you. You couldn't have picked a more ironic figure than Charlie Kirk to assassinate. Charlie Kirk was the epitome of people who are saying, look, I don't necessarily agree with you, but let's talk. Let's have an open mic. Let's deal with this peaceably. To shoot a Charlie Kirk was the most ludicrous thing the left could have done. Now, is every leftist responsible for the murder of Charlie Kirk? No. But it seems a heck of a lot of them are justifying it. Indeed, even in the halls of Congress, when Speaker Mike Johnson tried to have a moment of prayer, the Democrats tried to oppose it. What nonsense.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's like at the president's speech before joint session of Congress. They refused to acknowledge the young black boy who had fought cancer and won, the mothers who'd lost children in gun situations with terrorists. Just I don't know why or how they got so far out of step with the rest of the country, Frank. But I clearly believe they are out of step, and I don't see anybody that will step up because of what you were saying. If you're going to disagree with people on the left, and you're from the left, you're taking your life in your hands. Yeah. And so the reason there isn't anybody who's jumped up and said we're for this or against this is they're afraid. And I think that that's true. And you've got a small number of people who are full of hate rhetoric that they believe that they can sway the country based on their oratorial skills and the subject matter they're talking about, and they're wrong on both.
I may have one answer for your question. If you want to know how how the Democratic Party became so hard left, look at their major donors, from the George Soros types to the Tom Steyers out in California. These are all hard left people. And they have, using their dollars, have pulled the Democratic Party further and further to the hard left. That's where their dollars are coming from. Look, for example, at the mayoral race in New York, where a communist is running for mayor and seems to be the front runner. The fact is, about 80% of his contributions are coming from outside of New York, coming from those big left wing donors. So, what the Democrats are doing is following their donors and following them further and further to the left.
Also in New York, we found out, in fact, the mayoral candidate talked about it. And you've mentioned it on this show, the number of Muslims who have moved into New York City
Yeah.
were instrumental in getting him the nomination. They turned out and voted and had enough power to influence the outcome of the election.
Yeah. It was a clever move on the part of the Obama administration. It started basically then, where huge numbers of people from the Middle East, from countries supporting terror, were allowed to immigrate into the United States. And they were very strategically and very cleverly put in key congressional districts so that they became the majority in those districts.
Yeah, and as we know, our lady friend from Minneapolis, who do you think she's in trouble? Is she going to lose her committee assignments, you think, Frank?
It's possible she can lose some committee assignments. She's not going to lose her seat, though.
Because they just reelect her and bring her back in again.
Yeah, that's not going to be an issue.
Okay.
Now, the Democrats, as they look to the midterms and eventually to the presidential, will try to make some feints towards the middle. And I think that's why there's a possibility that the Democrats in Congress will strip her of some committee positions to say, hey, look, we're not really all like that. We're still the Democratic Party. It's an illusion, of course. They are actually becoming more like that. But I think they will try to present the illusion that they're not all that hard left by taking some committee positions away from her.
How do you think the Democratic Party, as we know it today, can move to the center?
It's a great question, but I don't know if it can at this point. Let's take an example here in New York. Governor Hochul just endorsed Mondami, the communist candidate for mayor. She is so frightened of the left wing of her party, who are the activist groups, that she felt compelled to do something that's going to, frankly, imperil her own chances. I think the Democratic Party is so enthralled to the hard left for donations and for enthusiasm that I don't see how they get themselves out of this. Are there any other Fettermans out there? I don't know if there are any people like that. Any Josh Shapiro's out there besides one or two people like that? Not many. I think they've got a real problem on their hands.
Yeah, somebody said one of the problems that the left has is that they don't have a Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, that's true. And I don't think after the Charlie Kirk assassination that conservative students on college campuses are going to be so quiescent anymore when their teachers fail them for having the wrong ideas, when college administrators slap down their public displays, like in events that they have, whereas the left is able to run roughshod over everything. I think they've awakened, as that Japanese admiral said after Pearl Harbor, they've awakened a sleeping giant.
Yeah, I agree with that. One piece of information, AOC, when one of her first comments after Charlie was shot, she was standing, I don't know where she was standing, but she was talking to a bunch of reporters, and she said, "This is the reason why we need gun control." And I had heard this argument for years, and I can't tell you why I hadn't researched it, but I was motivated in trying to figure out whether what she's saying makes sense or not. I always believed that stricter gun control would hurt the average American citizen who is responsible than it would the bad guys. And if you take the guns away from the good guys, the bad guys have it and they have control. So I did some research just to give you some information. I looked up and I asked on Google how many people were homicide victims in 2024. About 22,000. And I found a survey conducted by the Bureau of Prisons, who went around the country and over the 10-year period ending in 2024, had conversations and interviews with convicted felons who killed their people. And they asked them a bunch of questions, and one of the questions which I was fascinated at was, where did you get your gun? Because the left would have you believe they're going into the gun shows or the gun shops and buying them right and left. In fact, what happened, the survey showed that 53% of the crimes of murder that were committed with the weapon were with illegal weapons that were never registered. And then they went in and where else did you get guns? Well, break-ins and robberies that they were stolen. So then they asked the ultimate question: what percentage of the people that are incarcerated for homicide actually bought a legal gun to use it? 2%. 2%. Now, I got one more set of numbers for you. So we had 22,000 people that were killed in 2024 in homicides. And we want to take away all the guns and regulate guns. But 43,000 people committed suicide in this country in 2024. Almost double the number of people that were murdered took their own lives. Handgun was the preferred weapon, and they bought it themselves legally. And so I look at what the left is saying is, why are we not talking about a much bigger problem in terms of people that are killing themselves in suicide prevention? Because I believe that category, Frank, is about to explode, because we've got young people who went through the transgender stuff that have buyer's remorse, but they can't go back. We've got depression with what's going on in the country in terms of confidence and trust in the government and the CDC and the FDA and other places. The emotional problems are growing exponentially in this country, and they're going to more and more will turn to taking their lives and perhaps other people's lives when they go.
You know, the gun control argument doesn't pass the logic test. If someone is going to rape, rob, or murder, do they really stop and say, oh my goodness, I'd better not use a gun in that crime because I could get in trouble, and that would be wrong? Obvious nonsense. The other part of it is trying to sue gun manufacturers. I've got this deadly pencil in my hand right here. If I choose to leap over the internet and leap into Jim's studio and poke his eye out with the pencil, it's not the pencil's fault. It's not the pencil manufacturer's fault. It's my fault. So that argument that guns kill people, that somehow or other you can take away guns and it'll eliminate the problem, or that you can sue gun manufacturers and it'll take away the problem, again, doesn't pass the logic test.
Right. The other thing that I also noticed, I did some research on Memphis, and I know that Chicago has the highest, 13 years in a row, was the #1 murder capital of the United States. But Memphis, Tennessee is the 9th most dangerous city in the world.
In the world.
In the world. 9th most dangerous city in the world, Memphis, Tennessee. And the mayor, when Trump first talked about coming, the governor was all in favor of it, and so was the mayor. But by last Saturday, the mayor had kind of, I don't think we really need the National Guard. So somebody got to him because he was in favor of it earlier in the week, but he was against it later in the week. So I still believe in my heart of hearts that crime will be the #1 issue in the midterm elections.
And particularly in the blue cities. I think it's going to be a real problem.
Yep. And the Democrats don't seem to care. They don't seem to care. So
again, I think part of the problem is that their donors are all into this gun control thing. They're all into the let them loose, no cash bail, and they can't escape the fact that they're owned by their donors.
I haven't seen anything, maybe you've seen more recent data, but I haven't seen any results past the first 13 days in Washington, D.C. Are things still pretty good there? Have you seen, Frank?
I have not seen the latest data, but from what I understand, crime basically dropped through the floor, which is another situation. This was a Trump solution. I guess you could say a Republican or conservative solution that actually worked. And the Democrats are left sputtering. Well, this is a terrible thing. Why? I mean, are you in favor of crime? That's the corner they've been put into.
Yeah, I think it's the only question that voters need to ask themselves or ask Democratic candidates in the midterms. How many murders is an acceptable number of murders in our town?
Well said.
So IQ, listening to all this, what do you have for everybody?
Everybody is missing something about Zohran. Frank keeps saying that he's a communist. I told you before, don't think about his political point of view. Go after his religious point of view. He is a traitor. He is a Sharia compliant Muslim. He can never integrate, assimilate, or become a loyal citizen. Same thing with Ilhan Omar. All of you are talking about completed, you're beating around the bush, but they are self-destructing. Ilhan Omar wears the hijab. The fact that she wears the hijab means Sharia compliant. The fact that she is Sharia compliant, she can never be a loyal citizen. It's simple. But nobody, for example, let somebody go and meet with Zahran Mandani. Ask him one question in two parts. As a Muslim, what does the Quran call Americans who are not Muslims? Part two, what does the Quran and Sharia have in store for Americans who are not Muslim? Simple question. The answer. The Quran says Americans who are not Muslim are called kuffar, infidels. What is their destiny? Either convert to Islam, that means go submit to Sharia, or be exterminated. Why is it so difficult? Nobody asked the question. And it's not even legality, nothing to do with legals. They are traitors in plain sight. Ilhan Omar, she married her brother and screwed up the system, and nobody does anything. She made millions, and nobody does anything. She is accusing America of racism. The piece of shit like her coming from Somalia.
That's why we have a delay.
Yeah.
Go
I'm
ahead.
glad you have a delay. Okay, have a delay.
Go ahead, my friend.
Yeah, but I mean, you want to call her crap? Crap, she is. But she is a racist. Every Muslim is a racist. Why? 20% of humanity is Muslim. They hate 80% of humanity who are not Muslim. Nobody mentions this. Why? Even here on the show. Concentrate on his religion. Nothing to do with communism. This is the red herring, the communism part. He covers himself that way. He is a stealth jihad. There are three types of jihad: war jihad, stealth jihad, and they call it immigration jihad. That means the people who came by the boats illegally to fill America with literally young men of military age. Most of them are young men of military age. They're not coming with their wives.
Yep.
And nobody mentions this. Nobody. I'll leave it to you guys.
Frank, let me ask you a question about what IQ just said. You're a New Yorker. Is there a New York press that will take those two questions that IQ raised, and will they go and talk to him, and will they ask those questions, or will they be too afraid to ask her those questions?
Oh, I think undeniably they'd be too afraid to ask him the questions. Even bringing up the concept of religion as part of Mondami's makeup is something I haven't seen in the press at all. New York, with its numerous stations, TV stations, radio stations, concentrating on all news all the time, various newspapers, that issue has not been raised in the slightest.
Of course they wouldn't be. They're all leftists. Why would they raise it? They cover Islam. Look what's happening in England. On Saturday, 150,000 to 200,000 British people demonstrated with their flags. It's not enough. It's not enough. You've got to confront them. It's not enough just talking
Just
about
to
it.
jump in there, just to jump in there for a second, I have it from some sources who were in the old country that actually the number was far larger than what the press reported, which I
Correct.
can believe. I have covered live some of the Tea Party events back, in the earlier part of the 21st century, and
Yeah.
clearly there were, up to 750,000 people or 500,000 people, and the press variously reported it as being 50,000 to 100,000, which was sheer,
Yep.
utter, total nonsense.
Well, the Daily News had in its paper over the weekend, its Sunday edition, a cover of what was going on over the Tower Bridge and around, and they said over 1 million people came out to honor Charlie.
Yeah, can believe it. Can believe it.
They opened the greatest comeback in history, the second greatest comeback in history. The first was Trump winning the 2024, and now they have now created maybe 100,000 new Charlie Kirks. And this is the best thing that happened to the Republican Party, really. All these young people who are supporting Kirk will vote Republican, all of them. They will not vote left. No way.
What do you think, Frank? Do you think that the Charlie's movement will continue to grow and expand?
Oh, I think so. I think definitely so. In two separate ways. One, simply because of a reaction to the assassination, and two, because those centrist and conservative students on campus no longer are going to be cowed by teachers threatening to fail them if they gave answers that didn't comply with the left. And they're going to stand up, I think, to college administrators who try to censor them in college press, college papers, and college events. I think they have been emboldened, not intimidated by the Kirk assassination.
You're absolutely right. A young girl, she took a video of her teacher about transgenderism, and she gave it, it's on the YouTube, it's already on the internet. They fired the teacher and they fired the superior to the teacher. Why? Because the girl stood up. She said, the president of the United States said this is illegal what you're doing. And it was illegal because it was prohibited by the new administration. But of course, the leftist teacher, she thought she can get away with it. Well, she didn't get away with it. Another thing, over 20,000 new applications for Kirk's type of turning point. Yeah, turning point. They have applied 20,000 people. No, it's huge. It's an explosion. It will be beautiful, beautiful, really beautiful.
Do you think, Frank, that there was a poll question that I had from my class yesterday, and it was a question that was published on Saturday, and the question was the death of Charlie Kirk a watershed moment, or is there more and more dangerous to come? And 80% more and more dangerous to come.
It's an interesting question. I think it definitely was a watershed. It's a turning point, to use a pun. But on the other hand, is there more to come? I think as the left becomes completely isolated, as the voters increasingly reject progressivism, I think the only alternative they have is to turn to violence, and I do see that happening.
And
I agree.
You think more people will be shot?
Quite possibly.
There will be more, definitely.
I will go all the way back to the first Trump inauguration. I was covering it live in Washington, D.C. And before the guy even got inaugurated, people were marching in the streets, impeach Donald Trump, kill Donald Trump, things of that sort.
Yeah.
These are not rational people we're dealing with. These are people who have lost all hold on reason. Their hatred is their identification of themselves. And I think that's a dangerous thing.
Right.
Frank, I can't understand. You are in high authority. You are not a small level person. You cannot find a single reporter, a single one, even not a reporter, to ask these questions that I said about the Mandani. Anybody could go in public and ask him the question. How is it conceivable that nobody can ask that question? You want me to come to America and you arrange it for me? I swear to you, I will fly to America. I will pay for it. As long as you arrange a meeting, I'll do it. How much more do you want?
The problem is if the question, let me tell you what the problem is though. If the problem is, if the question is actually asked and even answered, you're not going to get much of the media to cover it.
Yep.
They're going to be so afraid of being called racist or anything else that they will make sure that that question and its answer
Maybe
never
not,
sees the
maybe
light
not.
of
But
day.
the alternate media might do it. The alternate media might do it. And if we inform them that is going to happen, they will explode it. We keep thinking about the media as prominent now. It's not prominent anymore. It's not. The alternate media, I mean, take any other podcasters, they've got 20, 30 million people following them. It's not a joke. That's more than CNN, MSNBC, and NBC put together. No, we have alternative. If we tell the alternative media that such an event is going to happen, believe me, it will break the records. But all I need is one person. If you can arrange it, I'll come. I'll do it. I'll do it. Honestly, I'll do it.
Somehow, I don't think the Mandami people are going to be too keen to arrange that.
Right.
No.
I don't either.
Wait. You're assuming I have to. No, you're assuming we have a meeting of the point. It will be when he is out somewhere, and I'm going to ask him the question, and I have the answer. I'll give him 15 seconds. If he doesn't answer, I will answer it. Believe me, it's a win-win situation, no matter how you slice it. Maybe not for me. Maybe I'll get killed. But nonetheless, in general terms, it will be a win-win situation. But I'm willing to take the risk.
Well, as we wrap up here with Frank, Frank, give us a preview of the radio program, TV show, everything this weekend.
We're going to be talking to Bill Walton, who's the host, of course, of the Bill Walton Show, about what's going on with this deepening alliance between China, Russia, and North Korea. We're also going to be talking to Salvatore Litvak, who is the author of Let My People Laugh, Greatest Jewish Jokes of All Time, and the director of the upcoming movie Guns and Moses. We're going to be talking about the rise of anti-Semitism throughout the world.
And before we let you go, Frank, how do people access everything you're doing, my friend?
If you can't find it on your local station, wherever you are, you can go to usagovpolicy.com.
Fantastic. Well, Frank, you are always just such a fountain of information. We really appreciate having you on, my friend.
Thank you so much, guys. Look forward to our discussion next week.
Yes. So as we switch gears here, we've got our next guest joining us here on our big program. Brian Reisinger is with us. Brian, how are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good, James. It's good to be with you. How are you doing?
Pretty good, actually. And you have got quite the book. Tell me and Dan and IQ a little bit about it, and then I know the boys are going to have some questions for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you guys showed us such a great job of highlighting what's going on with, rural America from standpoint of workers, farmers, etc. And I appreciate getting the chance to talk about this. So we've had Land Rich Cash pour out for about a year. We just had our new paperback edition come out. And I'm grateful to say that farm families and people who care about where their food comes from have been picking it up for the past year. And we've really started a national conversation around how the loss of our family farms, the hollowing out of rural America, is affecting every single American dinner table with more expensive food and all kinds of other issues.
So I guess I'll start with Dan. Dan, what kind of questions do you have for Brian about his book and farming and everything in general?
Brian, thank you for joining us today. Let me ask you a question about what the Trump administration is trying to do to sign an executive order to reclaim some of the 277,000 acres that has been sold, farmland that has been sold to foreign interest. We don't know how much of that, if any, is in Chinese hands, but we suspect there are some, and make it illegal for foreign individuals or foreign governments to buy farmland in the United States. Do you support that?
Yeah, there's definitely action that needs to be taken. And the reality, we've actually seen some states, Missouri did some interesting things. They took some legal action to try to combat that. And here's where you hear the farming community come down. They will tell you some farmers would never dream of any foreign investment of any kind on their land. Some farmers will say, friendly investment from allied countries in an industry can be helpful. But the issue that everybody, I think, agrees on is not having a world where foreign adversaries can come in and own hundreds of thousands of acres of American farmland. And it's been shocking. The amount of farmland owned by foreign entities has increased double digits, 15% in just 2 years. And the Chinese Communist Party is driving an alarming amount of that. So there's no question that we need to have limits around that. And we also need to have more transparency. It's actually something I think we get some bipartisan support for. There's been some bipartisan support for at different times.
But as I understand from this executive order, they want to claw back some of that 277,000 acres. And perhaps you don't know, maybe it's because maybe it hasn't been finalized yet of all the details, but I'm curious, do you know what happens to the land? Does it go to the government or does it go back to the original farmers? What's going to happen?
That's a good question. I'm studying what would be the downstream next steps of it, in part to understand some of the details you're noting. But I will just say, like unequivocally, clearly, there's no question that doing something about the land that has ended up in the hands of foreign adversaries needs to be done. And I think that clawing that land back, when we're talking about the Chinese Communist Party, when we're talking about Iran, we're talking about North Korea, there's a difference between an American landowner selling land to a country that's just a regular country out there, a friendly country, what have you, but a declared foreign adversary. If that land has ended up in the hands of a foreign adversary, there's absolutely room to say, hey, what can we do to unwind this?
Yeah, I'm thinking in terms of if there was a transaction with what, as you mentioned, a friendly country, but after that transaction is closed, there's shortly thereafter another transaction where the land is resold again to the Communist Party or whoever. That's a second sale, and I'm not sure that the Trump executive order can deal with second sales. On my Wednesday show last week, we have a woman who was a co-host on our show, and she lives in Colorado Springs. And there is an Air Force base there where Joe Biden moved Space Command to that base, and that is a strategic base, Air Force base, and it is basically barren land all the way around the Air Force base. But when it looked like that Space Command was going to stay there, investors bought thousands and thousands of acres of land to build 5,000 homes at about $500,000 apiece. And what happened was President Trump announced within the last couple of weeks that he wants to move Space Command to Huntsville, Alabama, near the Space and Rocket Center. And we're trying to find out whether or not, either directly or indirectly, whether there were any Chinese investors in that significant amount of land around, and whether or not the investors are going to develop that property to put those 5,000 homes on, which, by the way, are estimated to be able to be sold at about $500,000 a piece. There are very few people working on that Air Force base, and even if Space Command would have stayed, they could afford a $500,000 home. So, but we have examples all over the country where foreign investors have come in and acquired. And there's a provision under the law that there's an oversight committee made up of representatives from the House, the Senate, and the administration, who looks at foreign transactions from a national security standpoint, and whether or not the sale of a particular asset. The most recent, most ridiculous was the sale of the United States uranium supply to a Canadian investor who was fronting for Russia, and it went through. So it's going to be difficult to try and find out who the ultimate buyer is going to be. And it seems to me that the better thing is, and I'm curious when I'm asking this, what can a foreign investor from a friendly country do for the American farmer that an investor in the United States can't do?
Mhm. Yeah, and I guess what I'll say is you're touching on something that hits a couple of really important points. The Chinese are very patient in what they're doing, and they are happy to accumulate small or large parts of land over time to get their hands on our farmland and destabilize our food supply. To say nothing of the fact that you're talking about some really crucial property. In many cases, the land that they're buying is near military installations, and that's not a coincidence. And so, which doesn't surprise you or probably many of the listeners of this program, that that's not coincidental. And so it's a very serious issue we need to deal with. I'm not advocating one way or the other necessarily that we need to be allowing foreign investment. What I'm saying is that it would make a massive change in American agriculture that could put other things in jeopardy because the investment is already there and it's not causing a problem. And the thing that I've been focused on is figuring out how can we stop wiping out 45,000 farms a year for the past century. How can we prevent that from going forward? And so I think there's room for discussion and debate around how tight of controls do you want to have around any foreign investment. I think that's a worthy discussion to have. But the position that we're in right now, whether there's enough investment or not in rural America, which some people would argue there isn't, is that we'd be undoing things that aren't causing the same problems right now as Chinese purchase farmland, et cetera. Now, you raise a very legitimate issue, though, around second sales and fronting sales and things like that. And I think it's a worthy point that you're making.
There's the president, as he has laid on these various tariff agreements. From my perspective, looking at what he's trying to do for agricultural exports from the United States to these countries, which have not necessarily been able to happen. Is if everything goes through, is that going to be a boon to the American farmer by opening up export markets?
Yeah, if we can have a world where we're negotiating tougher trade deals that are more fair to American farmers, American workers, and we are expanding the map on the places that we're striking those deals, that can be a real boon. What's happened traditionally is that in the 90s and 2000s, the wide open free trade deals that were going on that took no account of whether America was getting ripped off or not, opened up a bunch of markets, but many of them, including China, weren't fair to American farmers. And the Chinese were doing currency manipulation. They were buying and then dumping after they'd gotten the American farmer hostage to them, all kinds of things that depress that price. And so we need to have tougher negotiations, and tariffs are a tool to do that. And we need to also open up more markets. The amazing thing about this is the piece that the media has completely missed is a huge amount of our trade is with China, more than any other country and more than many other countries combined. But there were actually only about 20 trade deals with countries near the end of the Biden administration. And so we can be tougher and negotiate harder with tariffs and ensure more fair deals for our farmers and our workers and open up more markets by negotiating with more countries. You started to see some of that momentum over the summer with the UK, Japan, other countries that were beginning to make deals with America. We can make more of those deals, and ultimately we can hope that China gets in line and starts dealing with us fairly. But if they don't, we can have our trade diversified by having struck deals with countries that are willing to, work with America after we drive a hard bargain.
No, I agree with you. I think that's a great thing. If we can create opportunities for our farmers, do you have the infrastructure if a boom was possible for exporting commodities, do we have the infrastructure to support that in the United States today?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have the infrastructure to support more exports, but there's two challenges that we need to be aware of. The first is that infrastructure largely supports the largest farms, and I'm not here to say that large or small. I'm not here to have that discussion in the context of this answer, but it largely favors larger farms that are able to produce commodity crops in large amounts. And that's fine. Maybe there's some of that we want to be doing, and that is part of a boom. We have the infrastructure for that. The part that we don't really have the infrastructure for is for those small and medium-sized family farms to, number one, be able to participate in those world markets in as full of a way, and for our domestic infrastructure. In other words, a lot of farmers have a place that they can take corn or something like that to go to a grain elevator that gets sold out on the international market. They don't have a place that they can take specialty garlic or artisan tomatoes or specialty wheat that's going into our domestic food supply for the people who care about where their food comes from. So we have infrastructure for exports for big farms. We need infrastructure for exports for farms of all sizes, and we need domestic infrastructure so that our farms can be meeting that demand of, more people than ever, especially with Maha, care about where their food is coming from. And so we need more infrastructure in some of those areas.
And
Brian,
go ahead.
question. The idea that Trump had of bringing in tens of thousands of South African people who are literally their farmers, would you object to that?
The issue around the South African farmers to me is really more of a general refugee issue. I don't know that it necessarily has a big impact on the issue of our disappearing American farmers. And the reason I say that is that we have land that is going out of business. We have farms that are going out of business because you can't make enough money on the land. We have young people who want to farm, but they can't get into it because they can't have the money. So the problem isn't a lack of farmers in terms of the disappearance of the American farmer, whether or not, anybody from South Africa or any other country from any particular background ought to come in, to me is more of a kind of a legal and war and peace question than it is a question of how it affects our farms.
Don't forget, these people they've been partners for maybe 200 years in Africa. And many of them are wealthy people. They will be able to employ Americans. This is so important. It's not only for themselves only. It's good for the whole of America. And these people are industrious people. They're not going to be a burden on the American people. They're not illegal refugees. They will be becoming legal refugees with expertise. Many of them with expertise. And there are tens of thousands of them. From my point of view, where I am from, I think it's a fantastic idea if it can be done. Instead of 17 million illegals that costing you hundreds of billions of dollars, you're bringing people who will contribute. That's the way I look at it. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and I don't necessarily feel strongly about it one direction or another. It's an interesting discussion. I think the central issue that we have in terms of our farms disappearing is the fact that it has become so hard to make a living growing food in this country. And that's something that is a function of scores of economic, governmental, and technological decisions over decades here in this country.
Yeah. Okay.
Brian, let me ask you a following up IQ with another question. We went through the fall of last year, the winter, and into the summer here in the United States, where a lot of people, because of the protests and riots on the college campuses around the country, and the costs that people had to send their children to school, to college, are beginning to really raise the serious question, is it worthwhile to send my child to college given the prospects of what they might study of finding employment? So what we have is people like Mike Rowe, who has instituted programs to move more and more students into the trade schools for electricians, carpenters, plumbers, whatever, where they can earn a very good living, perhaps more than the college graduate, working in a trade that's high in demand. But I wonder, what are we doing on agriculture? I mean, I know there were many, especially in the South, many colleges that were formed that were, the A&M was agricultural and mechanical. What's happening in the education sector that will make these young people who are seriously thinking about becoming farmers to get an education on how to run a family farm?
It's such a good question. And what you're hitting on, I think, first of all, just to speak to the broader issue, I mean, people having the ability and seeing what a bright future they can have working the trades, working with their hands, working with their back, I think is a good thing. And it is a good thing for our farm and ag sector too, because a lot of people, young people who, now I went off to college, people can go to the military, college, trade school, whatever is right for them. But a lot of people end up going into fields that take them further away from, places like our farms, places like our job sites across America, and having the people who have the interest and the aptitude to do that kind of work, electrical work, plumbing, carpentry, farming, I would include in that category. And so to answer your question about what we need to do around that and the importance of it, I think that we have a world where, to be honest, a lot of our higher education system has lost sight of what the land grant origins of a lot of our universities was. They were there to provide the kind of innovation needed to help our American agriculture system, the use of our resources, continue forward. Right now, we've got a lot of farms that don't feel like they get ideas for innovation, don't feel like they get training for what would be needed to come back to a farm. So if you go off to college, you often end up in another field as opposed to going to college and coming back to the farm and applying those innovative practices on the farm. So I think having our higher education institutions more focused around practical agriculture, innovative, but practical, so that it's not just theoretical out there in the higher education system. And then there on the farm, they're waiting for real answers and there isn't any innovation coming. So I think there's a lot of changes we could make to have a more workforce oriented focus at our land grant universities. I think it would be in keeping with what Mike is doing on the trades, and I'm glad he's doing it.
Yeah, there's the people are talking about the idea that uh, you it's very difficult today for a student at college, not impossible, but very, very difficult, and a very small percentage do, complete their education in 4 years. And it's now taking about 6 years to complete a 4-year degree. By having an agricultural situation, we don't have to go to school for 4 to 6 years. We can go to school for 2 years, get an associate degree in agriculture, and immediately go to work working on a farm.
Yeah.
And creating the opportunity to gain practical experience of what you learned at school, but at the same time create an opportunity to advance yourself into owning your own farm.
I agree with you. And the situation that solves is I hear so often across the country, people say, the young people don't want to work anywhere, they don't want to farm. That might be true for some individuals, but I say kind of BS. I mean, I see young people all across the country that are interested in 4-H, interested in FFA, but they're not going into farming because they don't have any guidance counselors telling them you can find a bright future in farming. And honestly, it's challenging to find a bright future in farming. Even if you have land in your family, if you're buying the farm from your dad or your grandpa, that's a high cost thing for a world where it's hard to make ends meet. And then if you don't have land in your family to buy in an affordable way over time, it's even harder. But if we have these programs that are showing young people, hey, farming has been struggling, yes. However, here are the workforce skills that you need, and here's the things that you need to be able to carry a farm business into the future. I think we'd have a lot more young people farming. I think we'd have a lot of our current farms that would continue rather than being ran by aging farmers who in some cases don't know where to turn for someone to take it over.
So in a typical situation, we have family farms that have been passed down for generations from family member to family member. And one of the issues that I've read about is that the family farm can be a curse when grandma passes away or grandpa passes away, because we've got estate taxes and then it goes to the next generation and taxed again when that generation dies out, so that the third generation is getting a piece of property, but they paid an ungodly tax burden.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Some families have had the opportunity to have a successor who's been identified, who's going to buy the farm over time. There's a plan for that transfer to occur through a sale, etc. But that process can get interrupted, or it can happen to families that don't have a clear path forward like that. What happens is they are taxed through the nose, and it forces them. It's not economical to keep the farm. They can't afford to take the costs of the farm and the property tax and everything else on top of being taxed when the farm comes to them. So they end up having to sell it. And the other thing that's tragic, and I'm so glad you're raising it, is this happens to families when they are at their most vulnerable. You know, you just lost a loved one, you just lost a patriarch or a matriarch, someone who carried that farm through the Depression or through the farm crisis. And now that land that this family cares about, not only have they lost a loved one, but they may lose the land that their family has loved and depended upon for decades.
You know, it's interesting to me. One of my sons is in the business of creating ESOP plans for acquisition for owners of property and businesses to sell them to their employees. And one of the things that drives this is the fact that the founding generation no longer can work or wants to work and wants to pass it on to somebody else. And family is the first, and they may have people in the family working in the business. So that even though it's not a farm, it may be a company business, a family business. You have the same issues of taxation and sale and disposition of the property that you have in a farm. And businesses can be just as expensive as major farms can be. But you have, do you have a finite number of congressmen or senators who are deep into the agricultural business in their states, as opposed to New York or other places which have a much smaller, diminished agricultural? Do you have enough support in Congress for what you're trying to do?
It's a really good question. It's one of the big challenges. The short answer is no. There are some policymakers who still come from farm country. More and more, our policymakers have been further and further away from the farms and what's happening on the ground. So they don't understand what's going on there, let alone how it affects our food supply. So we need more policymakers that are rooted in that. But the other thing we need is we need policymakers who are from different parts of the country, different walks of life, to understand the link between farms and our food, whether they understand what's going on in the farm or not. Because right now we have a disconnect. The people who care about our food supply don't always see how it connects to the farm. The people who care about our farms are not always able to be part of those conversations around our greater food supply and the consumer side of it. So we need more people who understand in public office, and we need more of them to be willing to have real conversations with each other about solutions. And you know, it doesn't surprise you to know that that's a challenging thing to come by in Washington these days.
Right. Let me take one more segment. We got about 5 minutes left in the show. Um, the situation is difficult when you think in terms of, okay, I would like to be a farmer, but the press in many cases has not been kind because they were telling stories about it's difficult for, quote, farmers to export their products to, say, Europe or other parts of the world because we have a problem with the quality of the food that we're shipping. And we have Mr. Kennedy, who's trying to take a lot of the food colorings and supplements and stuff out of the food supply, so that ultimately we produce a better quality of food stuff to export that the foreign nations. And I've traveled to Europe many times and have always heard that the quality of food in Europe is superior to the quality of food in New York, in the United States. And you got a reputation that you got to overcome. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, and I do want to note I've got to run because of a prior appointment, but I should say the best way to deal with it is just to simply note that the resilience of the American farmer is something that surpasses anything else that I've ever seen. And we have in this country made so many choices. You've touched on them with both of you, all of you have your questions today. We've touched on so many ways that our country has made it not economical for our farms to move forward. Imagine if we made some changes and made it economical. I think our farm families could accomplish a lot.
Thank you for joining us today. Back to you, Julie.
As we wrap up here, let's start with Brian. Brian, how do we get your book and get involved with everything you're doing online, my friend?
Absolutely. I appreciate it. You can find Land Rich Cash Poor on Amazon, anywhere else you buy books online. It's also in bookstores nationwide. And I'm at brian-reisinger.com. That's BRIAN-REISINGER.com. I appreciate everybody spreading the word on these issues.
Fantastic. So Dan, bring us up to speed on your projects, my friend.
I'm continuing to write the memoirs of my Irish gentleman. I finished 3 chapters last week. We're up to, I think, 32 or 33 chapters. And he found out something. He created this monster of wanting to get to America, and he did everything he could, and he raised these pigs to get the money to pay for the airfare, and he got here, and he found out 2 things. He didn't speak the language, and he didn't know how to count the money. So,
wow.
so his sister, her husband, and their 2 children set up a little school in their house, and each person in the family was responsible for teaching Joe something to get him started in understanding America, business, language of English, monetary systems. And he's now got a job, and he's going to, we're working next week on his first day at his first job in America. And he's very concerned because he can't read menus. He doesn't understand the money, but he wants to try. And it's been a wonderful adventure. And I'm thrilled by being able to help him. The regular books are available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or through your local bookstore. Shows are on AM/FM 24/7 for radio, Rumble, and Your News for video. And my personal website is danperkins.guru. And of course, the foundation website is songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us.
So IQ, first of all, what did you think of today's show?
As usual, very informative. I mean, it's always informative. And it's always logical. I mean, I worry about what the gentleman said about the farms in America. And my idea, and Trump's idea,
Yes.
was Trump's idea, to bring tens of thousands of South Africans is a brilliant idea if you can do it. Brilliant. Otherwise, beautiful show as usual. But Zahran must be eliminated. He must be eliminated.
Well, I tend to think, since Bernie Sanders is campaigning with him, that probably won't take long to eliminate him, because I have secretly thought in the past that if you want to sink someone's chances at being president or any elected official, you send Bernie out to campaign with them.
I love that.
I
love
hate
that.
but that seems to be the way things go. Gentlemen, I look forward to chatting with you next Tuesday. We will talk to IQ on Thursday. And Dan, have yourself a wonderful rest of the week. We'll talk to you next Tuesday. Thank you, guys.
Sir.
Appreciate it.